This Zero Now program is brought to you with the support of our founding partners.
I can't be protected by hopes and prayers.
I won't use hope towards what's next. I'll make my own way.
I know impossible is an opinion.
I won't wait for safer schools. I want to create them.
I don't want to be afraid anymore.
I refuse to be a victim.
I'm just one person.
Determined
To bring us back to zero.
I'm just one person.
Determined
To bring us back to zero.
I am just one person.
Determined to bring us back to zero.
Hello, Greg Shaffer. Thank you so much for joining us at Zero Now today. So I wanted to start off by giving you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background in public safety.
Sure, I did 11 years in the U.S. Coast Guard right out of college. And then after that, I joined the FBI. I was in the FBI for a little over 20 years. 6 of those years, I was on the FBI's hostage rescue team, conducting tactical operations all over the globe, to include Pakistan, Yemen, Iraq, Afghanistan, that sort of thing. Left the FBI in 2015, started my own security company, Shaffer Security Group. We are a boutique security firm specializing in special event security, planning and management, executive protection, and tactical training. I wrote a book in 2019 titled Stay Safe, Security Secrets for Today's Dangerous World, which is doing very well. It's basically the book about how to stay safe in today's more dangerous world for the layman, for the high school, college student, for the housewife, for the father who maybe has never had any experience in law enforcement, military, or with firearms. It's how to stay safe, for the common person, the common citizen. And then 2 years ago, I joined with Chris Gronick in the Active Shooter Prevention Project, where I'm a principal there today.
So you mentioned that you joined with Chris Grolinek, who we also had an opportunity to interview. He's an awesome guy. He formed the Active Shooter Prevention Project, as you mentioned. So how did you get into, or how did you start becoming interested in the active shooter phenomenon after your career in the FBI?
I've always been fascinated with violence. I'm a student of violence. Being a member of the hostage rescue team, I've been in several tactical situations where violence was necessary to stop evil. I'm a firm believer that, evil does exist, and I've seen it firsthand. Most people, most citizens have never been a victim of violence, and therefore don't think about what they should do when the time arrives. It's like, I get asked this question a lot, Michael, like, should I own a firearm? Should I get a firearm? Should I keep it in the bedroom? How do I get trained on that sort of thing? And my reply is this: first, if you do decide to buy a firearm, it's a very personal decision, and it comes with a lot of responsibility. But my reply to whether they should or not is this: everybody has auto insurance in case they get in a car accident. Everybody has life insurance to take care of their family should they die. Everybody wears a seatbelt when they drive in case they're in an accident. Everybody locks their doors at night to prevent intruders from coming in. Everybody has health insurance. So if they become sick, they have something to cover them should bad things happen. So we all do things on a daily basis to help keep us safe in the event bad things happen. My question for a lot of those people who are balancing whether or not they should get a weapon, a firearm or not, is this: what is your plan of action should violence visit your life? You take all these other actions, all this insurance, locking the doors, seat belts, you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen in case of the kitchen fire. You take all these precautions in case bad things happen. Well, what is your plan of action should violence visit your life? And you can't go on the news today or read any kind of article online and not know in your heart that violence is increasing. We are living in a more dangerous world. And what is your plan of action should violence visit you?
So one of the things I hear you saying there is that it's important to put yourself in a position to be able to respond. And I think that that's one of the key tenets of your book. Something that when I was researching you, I found that was really interesting was that you said safety is not a skill set, it is a mindset. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean?
Well, yeah. Here's a perfect example. that horrific incident at the Pulse Nightclub in Orlando, Florida, several years ago. The shooter walks into the nightclub about 2 in the morning with an AR-15 and starts killing people instantaneously. 9 people ran into a restroom. 9. They ran into a restroom. They ran into the restroom because they knew their friends, their loved ones were being slaughtered on the dance floor. They ran in there to escape the violence. Now we know what happens next because all 9 of those people called 911 on their cell phones, and 911 calls are always recorded. What happened is the shooter walked into that restroom and shot and killed all 9 of those people one at a time. It took them over 20 seconds to do that. Now, I wasn't there, and I don't want to speak ill of the dead, but my question is this. What was their mindset? Because they just huddled in a corner, hugging each other, waiting for their turn to die. Now, I guarantee you this, Michael, if you and me and 7 other people ran into a restroom and we knew people were dying outside on that dance floor, and that shooter walked into that restroom, we would not be huddling together in a corner waiting for a turn to die. We would rip this man apart. I would say, Michael, you grab the weapon. I'm going to go for the throat. Young lady, you go for his eyes. Jim, you go for the left arm. Steve, you go for the right arm. Mary, you go for the left leg. We got 9 people. He cannot defeat 9 people if we all attack in unison. That's having a survival mindset. The people at the Pulse Nightclub didn't have that. And it's a shame. Another example is the horrific incident they had in Nice, France, where a 19-ton truck traveling at 45 miles an hour for over a mile ran over and killed, what was it? 80 people, 88 people or something like that. It's like, now I'll give you a truck running over and killing, a half a dozen or even a dozen. But for traveling over a mile at a high speed, if you're walking down that promenade, and it was a promenade, it was closed to traffic, it was their July 4th, Bastille Day, July 14th, it was their national holiday, and they had fireworks on the beach, and they closed the streets down to traffic, and everybody's on the street, and the truck is barreling down the street. I think that you would have sensed something was going on, that your survival mindset would have said, wait a minute, why are people screaming down here? And to save yourself, you can do one simple thing. That's get off the street. And he ran over people for over a mile and continued to do that until he's finally shot and killed by police. But again, what was that survival mindset? What was their situational awareness? They had to be totally had blinders on not to recognize that 19-ton truck was traveling 45 miles an hour down this pedestrian promenade.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about your work at the FBI. So one thing, to my understanding, that FBI agents do that's a little bit different from other organizations is you guys engage in a level of profiling and a level of understanding the criminal or the assailant's behavior so as to best figure out how to stop them. Is that something that can also be applied to these mass casualty events? Do you think there's any value in trying to take a step back and understanding these people on a psychological level, what's motivating them, understanding how they wanted to inflict these crimes, and using that to hopefully stop other monsters like them from forming in the future?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the key to do the profiling and get a good, picture. And this is especially true recently. In the last dozen or so active shooter events, somebody knew that they were mentally ill and they had a propensity for violence. In the last 12 or so, that was 100% true. People knew about it, but didn't know who to tell, where to tell, and then one of those people, if they were told, what to do with those individuals. So, let's take for instance schools. The ratio for students to a school counselor in America today, in American schools, is 475 to 1. 475 students for every 1 student counselor or school counselor. Our prisons have a 250 to 1 ratio. So our prisoners are getting better counseling than our students are at school. Now, the National Association of School Counselors recommend that the ratio be 200 to 1. So we are more than double that with we are more than double that at 475 students per 1 counselor. If we increase the counseling in our schools, those counselors will be able to identify better those that may have a propensity for violence. Okay? Then we have what we call assessment teams. Now, my brother was a Secret Service agent for 25 years. If somebody threatened the president, the Secret Service would visit his house, they would interview him, interview his friends, interview his coworkers, interview his family. They would look to see whether he had access to firearms, whether he had training with firearms. They would do an entire, threat assessment on that individual to see if he was a credible threat to the President of the United States. Now, we can do the same thing with school students that have a propensity for violence. You take the Parkland shooter, for example. Everybody knew he was kind of crazy. They all, when they found out that this individual was a shooter, nobody was surprised. The teachers weren't surprised. The students weren't surprised. They knew if there was going to be a school shooter, probably be this guy. So he was already on the radar, but we had no means or mechanism to do an assessment, a threat assessment on an individual. So we need to develop teams in schools who work with the local police, who work with the mental health care facilities, the psychiatrists and psychologists in town, the school counselors, the principal, teachers. So when somebody gets on the radar that he might be, somewhat of a threat to himself or somebody else, they can do an assessment. They can talk to him, talk to his parents, talk to his friends, talk to his coworkers, see if he has availability to get firearms or not. So I think we need to and that's all about prevention. So we need to get in front of this. We're doing all this work in responding to active shooter events. Let's start at the beginning and learn better in how to stop these active shooter events. And doing a threat assessment for those individuals that pop up on the radar that could be possibly violent is the way to do that.
Mm-hmm. So the thing is, I totally hear all of that, and I agree in theory, but in practice, what I'm thinking about is it's very hard to prevent a crime before it's actually happened because there's a whole host of legal and constitutional issues that stand in the way of that when it comes to people's civil liberties and freedom and innocent until proven guilty and all of those philosophical ideas. So when you say threat assessment, what in practical terms does that look like? What does that mean? And how can that be done in a way that doesn't violate people's freedoms?
Well, you're absolutely right, Michael. That's a very slippery slope. Talking about a person's individual right to privacy, individual right to own firearms, that sort of thing. But if somebody's identified as having a mental health issue, then I think that supersedes their civil rights to own a weapon or their civil rights of and nothing. You're not violating anybody's rights by interviewing them. You're not violating anybody's civil rights by interviewing their friends or their family members or coworkers. So that's all well and good. And you can garner a lot of intelligence and a lot of information just by talking to people and talking to their friends. So if they've already been identified as a possible mental health issue, so we need to put that higher on the scale of importance than let's say their civil liberties. Now again, very slippery slope. These red flag laws. I'm not a big fan. Let's say a man gets separated from his wife, going through a horrific, just a nasty divorce, and the ex-wife decides to call the police and say, hey, he's a danger to society, he's a danger to himself, and I know he's got 14 guns in his gun safe, and he's prior military, and he supports Donald Trump. Oh my God, that's easily something that could happen where it's gone too far. And those red flag laws, again, very slippery slope. So it's great that you're thinking about that. My answer to that is there are bigger and better minds than mine that can come up with a solution, not violating somebody's civil rights, but still keeping them safe and keeping society safe from somebody who potentially has that mental health issue.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that I learned about you when I was doing some research is that you're not a supporter of a national strategy to combat school shootings. You say that there is no one-size-fits-all security plan that would work for all schools. So I'm curious if you could tell me a little bit more about that, and if, even with that said, there are things that you think every school across the board should have, and if so, what those things might be.
Again, great question, Michael. Yeah, I run, hide, fight. Not a big fan of that. I think the word hide is a wrong word, a bad word to use, and we never want to hide. If shooting's happening in the school, where's the last place you want to be? In the school. So I'm a big proponent of getting out of the school. But to address your question, no schools are alike. Here in Dallas, we have high schools that have 8 buildings and they're on 150 acres. You have buildings in New York City that are 8 stories tall, and they take an entire city block. The security plan for that 8-story structure and the 8-building structure with 8 buildings on 120 acre structure would be totally different. The number of personnel needed to secure that, the number of doors to access to those 2 elements would be totally different as well. So there's no one strategy when it comes to drafting a response plan and even drafting a prevention plan. Now, that being said, what can every school do? Again, great question. Here's my answer to that. We need to get better at prevention by doing a couple of things. We need to add cameras in and around our school buildings. And those cameras need to have artificial intelligence installed where those cameras can recognize weapons as they're pulled out of the locker or as they're pulled out of the trunk of a car, so that we can get early notification that somebody in the parking lot just pulled an AR-15 out of the trunk of their car and they're walking toward the school. Okay? That's artificial intelligence cameras. And then we need shot detection systems. So when a shot does ring out, the police are immediately notified of the exact location of where that shooter is. So when the police do respond, they can go straight to where that last shot was fired and not have to worry about going through the front door, checking every room as they go down the hallway. That takes time, and the more time it takes, the more people are being killed. So we need to get shot detection systems, gun detection systems. We need to put a film on the windows that make the window ballistic. We need better locks on the doors of our school, not only in the perimeter, the outer perimeter, but also the doors into the classroom need to be enhanced with locks where you just push a button and it locks instantaneously. No key involved, no turning the latch. You hit a button and an alarm goes off and every school door in that building gets locked down. We need separate alarm systems. We have an alarm system for a fire. We need a separate alarm system for active shooters. In today's world, what's more likely, an active shooter event or a fire in a school? We haven't had American child killed in a school fire in over 65 years. 65 years is the last time we had a child killed in a school fire in America. But we still mandate fire drills everywhere, in every school, in every month. We don't do that for active shooters. So there are things that every school can do to help prevent that. And then training as well, and improvised weapons, and where do you go, and when do you evacuate the school, and when do you shelter in place? Because again, my mantra is if there's a shooting going on, the last place I want to be is in that building where the shooting's going on. So I always say get out of the building. But how do we do that effectively, safely, and quickly?
Mm-hmm. So, Greg, it sounds like everything that you're saying goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of the interview, which is you need to develop and create that safety mindset. And for the record, I also think run, hide, fight is ridiculous. And I understand the thought process behind it. They're trying to do what they did with fire safety procedures and education programs, what they did with stop, drop, and roll. But the difference is run, hide, and fight are not necessarily applicable in every situation. As your anecdote with the Pulse shooting clearly demonstrated, hiding did not serve those 9 people well in the bathroom. So I don't think
like run, hide, fight too is like, where do you run? Where do you hide? How do you fight? I mean,
Exactly.
saying run, hide, fight is fine, but there's no training in how to do each of those steps.
Right.
Another mantra of mine is the body can't go where the mind has never been. Let me say it again. The body cannot go where the mind has never been. And you alluded to the stop, drop, and roll. That's the example I use. We've been told since we were 3 years old, should we spontaneously combust, should our clothes catch on fire, what's the one thing you do? You stop, drop, and roll. So we now have a plan in our mind, should we catch on fire, we can save ourselves. We need to have those tough conversations with our children, those tough conversations with our parishioners and our teachers and everything else. What are you going to do in the event of an active shooter? We got to have those hard discussions, develop a plan, and practice that plan. Because if we don't, when the caca hits the oscillating device called the fan, we're going to freeze in fear. We're going to stand there not knowing what to do because we didn't train our mind in what to do first. The body
Yeah.
can't go where the mind has never been.
Yeah, and I think that that mantra, the body can't go where the mind's never been, is perfectly applicable to those 9 people at Pulse because, you explained what you would have done and the plan that you would have devised had you been there. But you also have decades of law enforcement experience in the FBI and on the hostage rescue team that those 9 people didn't have. And they were scared and they were confused and they heard gunshots. Maybe they've never even heard gunshots before. And so they froze and they didn't know what to do in that situation. And I think to your point, we need to give people the tools so that when and if, God forbid, they find themselves in that situation, they know what to do. So on a personal level, what do you recommend parents teach their kids? What do you recommend school administrators do? How can we develop this safety mindset for ourselves?
Well, that's the $20,000 question. That's a loaded question. School administrators, they need to talk with local law enforcement, of course, and they need to talk to local or out-of-town professionals like myself. When I give my active shooter response training course, it is far different than anything the police do. The police are hamstrung with political correctness. The mayor tells them what they can and cannot say. You'll never hear a police officer telling the teachers, use a hammer and beat them over the head. Use improvised weapons. I'm a huge fan of improvised weapons. My daughter is a special education teacher in Northern Virginia. Her life is threatened almost monthly by a student with special needs. But I know that she has weapons in her desk drawer, such as a hammer, a screwdriver, a fire extinguisher, big pair of scissors about that long, a tactical pen, things that she can use or hand out to her students that can be used as a weapon to help defend her and her students should somebody come in their classroom and exert some kind of violence. So again, it's having those tough conversations, bringing in outside experts, bringing in technology firms or, again, firms like myself that can advise on technology firms to get that shot recognition system in play, to get the gun detection software in your cameras, to get that film on your windows and make them ballistic and bulletproof and breakproof. To get those cameras out in a mass notification system where a teacher just wears a lanyard across her neck and she pushes a button 3 times and it tells the entire school, students, teachers, administrators, and parents that it's an active shooter at the school. They push it once, it's a medical emergency. They push it twice, it's something else. Push it 3 times, it's an active shooter. But it's a mass notification system because communication is key. The earlier we can shut down that school, the more lives we'll save. And as for parents, they need to be as educated as anybody else in America on this. And I always ask this question when I give my seminars, when I give my speeches. How many parents out there, raise your hand, during a student-parent-teacher conference have asked their teachers, asked their sons or daughters' teachers, what is your plan of action should there be an active shooter at the school? And not a single hand ever goes up. So as parents, you are entrusting that teacher to take care of your child 8-10 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you don't have an idea of what they're going to do to save your child. I shame the parents. It's a shame on you. It's not just anymore about how well they're doing in math and reading and social studies. It's also about how are you, Mrs. Smith, the teacher, going to protect my child should violence interrupt that classroom? What are you going to do to save my child? And that teacher should have a very well laid out plan and be articulate and detailed on exactly what they do. And if they don't, you need to think about either getting training for that school or getting your kids into another school. But every parent should be asking those teachers those tough questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, Greg, I just want to say that I'm very grateful that you dedicated your life to this. You have so much experience. You have so much knowledge. I think that a lot of the things you've said, both on the personal level and an institutional level, can be super helpful. So we're at the last stage of the interview here. I just wanted to ask you, where do you and your organization plan on going from here? You guys have obviously made so much progress, but what's the next step for you?
Well, again, the Active Shooter Prevention Project, with Chris as the founding partner, I'm a principal. We have teamed up with 18 other companies that specialize in prevention of violence. We have those companies, in our portfolio that have the shot detection, the gun detection, the window films, the cameras, the notification systems. So it's one-stop shopping. So our plan is just get the word out. Listen, Every school, every church, every synagogue, every warehouse, every law firm needs to be prepared for an active shooter event. Who would have ever thought it's going to happen in a church of less than 100 in a town of less than 1,000 in Southern Springs, Texas? I mean, if it can happen in a town of 1,000, it can happen anywhere. So don't think it's never going to happen to you. Don't be that naive. Don't bury your head in the sand. You have to prepare. And again, all these companies, all these churches, all these schools, they have the insurance to cover them should a fire, start, should, something get stolen, and they drive to school with their seatbelts on and their airbags, and they got the auto insurance and health insurance. I talked about that earlier. They need to prepare their school, their firm, their church for the same thing. You got to prepare, you got to train, you got to have that technology in place to give you notification of when bad things are about to happen, so we can get in front of the event versus just responding to the event.
Mm-hmm. And Greg, I think that message is what makes you so different, because so many times when people have these conversations, their analysis of the situation starts and stops with gun control. They say, if we could just get rid of guns, if we could take guns away from people, if we could make it harder to get guns, all of this would go away. It sounds like from the conversation that we've had, you don't subscribe to that. You see a much more nuanced view of what's going on here. And you know that regardless of the process of buying a weapon, if somebody wants to cause mass pain and casualty, they'll find a way. So, what do you say to maybe people who view it that way, and how do you want to open their minds to see that this is a very unique, multifaceted issue?
Well, there's no such thing as gun violence. It doesn't exist. A gun is an inanimate object. It cannot enact or conduct violence on its own. It's the person behind the weapon that causes the violence. So I hate that term, gun violence. A couple statistics for you. One is this: the percentage of homes in America that have firearms in them, the percentage has not changed significantly over the last 50 years. Okay? We have 400 million firearms in America. Okay? And something like 20 trillion rounds of ammunition. Okay? Gun confiscation will never work. They always say, well, look, it happened in Australia. They were able to get the guns out of Australia. Well, the entire continent of Australia is 20 million people. I mean, that's the city of New York for us. We have 400 million people. You're not going to get 400 million people to confiscate their guns. That ship is sailed. The Second Amendment guarantees our right to have a gun. You're never going to get the guns out of American hands. It's in our culture. It's in our lives. It's not going to happen. And guns don't cause violence. There's not an increase in percentage of the number of homes that have firearms. Okay, it's been the same. And an anecdotal story is this right here. Growing up in Texas, going hunting before and after school, me and my friends would have a rifle in the back of our pickup truck in the window or in the back seat of our car, and we would drive to school during hunting season every day. So we took guns to school, but we did not have active shooters back in my day in high school. Why is that? Guns haven't changed. Society has changed. We are a more violent society. We have more violent video games and movies than ever before. When I got into the military, they desensitized me to the horrors of war by showing me war videos, actual footage of war. It desensitized me. So when I saw the blood and gore, it wasn't the first time I saw it. I've seen it on video and seen it in the movies. So when I saw it in real life, I was more immune to it. Well, videos and violent movies are the same thing to our children. It's gotten so expensive you can't have a mother stay home and raise her kids anymore. Okay, every household is a double income household because it's so expensive. We need mothers to stay home to teach their kids between right and wrong. Church attendance has gone down dramatically over the last 20 and 30 years. Again, nobody's teaching their kids what's right and what's wrong, what's moral, what's immoral, what's ethical, what's unethical. We have ADHD medication being given to our kids, which is only a result of the fact that our kids aren't getting enough exercise. They're not that they're spastic or that they're have too much energy. They're just not getting enough exercise. And lastly, we have antidepressant medication that we're giving our kids. You look on the package insert of any antidepressant, and one of the side effects for juveniles is suicidal ideation.
Increased, yep.
How many of these active shooters that are under 18 or under 21 were on antidepressants? My guess is a vast majority. So there are a lot of things society-wise. We have the revolving revolving door in the judicial system. You commit a heinous act, and in 2 years you're back on the street, or You know, and nowadays you can admit a heinous act and you're out on the street in 3 hours. The police officers ain't done their paperwork yet. So society has changed. Guns haven't changed. The number of guns hasn't changed. The availability of firearms has not changed. We, as a culture and as a people, have changed. So it's not a gun violence problem. It's an evil person problem.
Mm-hmm. Greg, thank you so much. I think what makes Zero now so special is that we could have a conversation like this, and then we have people on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, but we all come together with the common goal. This was an awesome conversation. You have a super unique perspective on this stuff, and I just wanted to thank you for your time and for your dedication.
Thank you for what you do, Michael. Appreciate it. Get the word out. We can stop this.
Absolutely. Thank you again.